different issues there. First, generally, then we'll talk about the Orsted project specifically, and finally, the U.S. wind project. In a general offshore wind, BOEM has identified 2 new potential lease areas in our vicinity. The first area, known as A2, is north of us off the Delaware coast. The closest point of the lease area, to Ocean City, is 33 miles. The second area, which is labeled as B1, is south of us off the coast of Assateague Island, and the closest point to Ocean City is approximately 25 miles. We are now in the draft environmental impact statement process for these 2 areas. Essentially what happens is they're going to go through that environmental impact process. Then those areas will get bid out. It's important to note that, and this is also important for the existing projects, when these lease areas are bid out, when the environmental impact statement is done, all the environmental impact statement is looking at this stage is the area technically feasible that a wind farm could potentially be built there, but it does not look at what the impacts of the offshore wind would be. It only looks at the impacts for any survey work and any impacts for a potential meteorological buoy or tower. It does not look at the potential environmental impacts for the wind farm itself. So it's important to note that the 2 projects that are currently being proposed, Orsted and U.S. Wind, while an environmental impact statement was done for those 2 areas when they were bid out, that environmental impact statement only looked at those 2 things, the impact of any survey work and the impact of any meteorological tower. So that is the process that we are in now for these 2 new potential lease areas. Ocean City has been accepted as a consulting party as part of the EIS process for the final approval. We have already formally commented requesting 2 things: that turbine sizes be restricted in all areas such as that the top of the nacelle is not visible from Ocean City. That is the council's position. And that the western boundary of both areas the western boundary of B1, that's the area that's as close as 25 miles to us off Assateague, that be relocated further southwest, and also that the U.S. Wind lease area be relocated to either area A2 or B1 once they are approved. Talking about the Orsted project, that's the project that's currently in process off the coast of Delaware. They did commit to the Public Service Commission to keeping their turbines at least 20 miles from Ocean City. That is part of the hearing that they were required to have in front of the Public Service Commission that resulted from the public hearings that we held here in Ocean City. As a refresher, the way you get the essentially federal permit to federal approval to build these projects is through what is known as the Construction Operations Plan, commonly known as the COP. Orsted had submitted a COP some years ago. They have recently withdrawn that application. They plan on submitting a new application this fall, but they have not done so yet. They have committed to sharing any new turbine size or visual simulations with the city once they are finalized. Given BOEM review times, I would expect once they submit their application, it will be 6 months before BOEM formally accepts it. BOEM will not release the application to the public until they formally accept it. And that has taken 6 to 12 months previously. 6 months before BOEM accepts the application and releases to the public, and then at least 2 years after that for any approval. Orsted, in my opinion, is a minimum of 2.5 years before they would be able to construct anything. The other thing that's going on with Orsted is under the Public Service Commission order that awarded the ORECs to Orsted. ORECs are essentially the state subsidy that allows these projects to be built. An OREC essentially requires the regulated utility, in our case Delmarva Power, to purchase power from the offshore wind farms at a certain price, which is above what the market price is, so therefore you as the ratepayer subsidize these projects. As part of the condition of that OREC, Orsted, both Orsted and U.S. Wind, if they received any additional federal tax benefits or subsidies for the projects, they were supposed to be passed on to the ratepayer. Orsted has formally made a request to the Public Service Commission not to do that due to financial hardships. We are on the process right now of opposing that request through Tim Maloney, who's our attorney with the Public Service Commission. Regarding U.S. Wind, as you recall, U.S. Wind has submitted their COP. Their COP was accepted by BOEM. The town engaged a consulting firm to do a technical review of the COP, and that review work was underway when on July 28th, I received a copy of a letter from U.S. Wind to the Maryland Public Service Commission stating that they, the U.S. Wind, had amended substantial portions of the COP, including visual impact studies, et cetera, and had resubmitted it. I immediately suspended the consultant's work on the old COP because we don't want to pay the consultant to work and review something that now is being changed. And I formally requested that BOEM restart the full COP review process and immediately release the amended COP for public review. BOEM denied that request. On September 20th of this year, I received an email from U.S. Wind stating that they expected BOEM to release the draft environmental impact statement for their project on or about October 6th. Once the draft environmental impact statement is released, the public has 45 days to comment. I will tell you that the COP and the draft, we haven't seen the draft environmental impact statement, but the COP, the one that was originally submitted, if I stacked it up on my desk, printed it out, would probably be this tall. We will have 45 days to comment. I immediately requested a copy of the amended COP and requested an extension of the 45-day review period based on the fact that the amended COP was not available for review. BOEM has responded that the amended COP will now be released at the same time as the draft environmental impact statement and that there will be no extension to the 45-day review period. After meeting with our consultant, we are redirecting all their efforts towards review of the draft environmental impact statement instead of the COP so that we can make well-informed and technically sound comments within the 45-day period. I copied all our full federal congressional delegation on these developments so that they are aware of BOEM's and U.S. Wind's what I call tactics. Theoretically, BOEM could potentially approve the U.S. Wind project as early as July of 2024. U.S. Wind has still not requested the hearing before the Public Service Commission as required for their new larger turbine sizes. Are there any questions about where we are with offshore wind?
Member Gary.
So in short, they both U.S. Wind and Orsted, they both keep changing the deal.
Yes, that would be correct.
Persistent.
Yes.
Can you explain the subsidy again? I missed that part. So for Orsted, so if they received, pardon me?
You got it right.
They receive, say it again.
So under the conditions of the award of the ORECs, offshore renewable energy credits, one of the conditions that the Public Service Commission put on that is that any additional rebates that or subsidies that were created by the federal government after the award of these ORECs, that any of those additional rebates or subsidies would be passed on essentially back to the consumer so that they would reduce their essentially the fixed rate they were they're requiring the regulated utilities to pay and pass that savings on to the consumer.
Can I put like a semicolon right there, or just
Yes.
push the pause button? All right. So, and just for edification for me, but maybe for the public too. So basically, all of the ratepayers in Maryland, our electricity bills our power bills are going up.
Yes, that's correct.
In order for companies from Italy or wherever they're from, Norway, I don't know where they're from, but in order for them to come over here and drill in the ocean. And then what the government said was, okay, we're going to do that, and then if there are any other rebates or any other incentives the government provides, you're going to repay it's basically a tax. We're all getting taxed. And we're going to eliminate some of that tax little by little if you get other government incentives. And now
That's a fair way of putting it, yes.
And then they said, okay, that's a deal. And now, because it's not a real business, it's a business funded by mandates that all of us pay their bills. Now that they don't have a real business, they're basically saying, all right, and the government's clearly motivated, at least a lot of the government's motivated. So they're getting the incentives, and now they're asking not to, we're basically a partner, small partners. It's like a dividend. So if I invest in a business and you pay me a dividend, and then that business says, you know what, I don't feel like paying you anymore. That's basically what's happening with this subsidy, is that right?
I think that's fair to say, yes.
But if the government then wants to provide those multinational companies more money, they could certainly tax us more if they want. There's nothing we can say about it.
Well,
Nothing
we can go to the Public Service Commission and plead our case, and the Office of People's Counsel that represents the ratepayers can plead their case, and then the Public Service Commission.
I guess there's
will
something
make a
we can say
decision.
about it, but there's nothing we can really do about it, so.
At this point, it feels like the cards are stacked against us.
If they say you're gonna pay more so a company from Italy can stay in business, then we just have to say, yes, sir, may I have another?
That's the way it's been so far.
Do we even get the power? So we're paying for the power.
The power.
Do we get the power we're paying for?
Well, the power goes to the grid,
Right.
so everybody gets the power. It's not like there's a direct connection to, the state. It goes into the PJM grid, which encompasses.
So it's best
from
use.
Manhattan all the way down.
So it's for
Yeah.
best use, basically, and if best use is in Manhattan, then the government's basically saying, thank you, Maryland, thank you, ratepayer in Maryland, thank you for paying that tax that we imposed on you, but we're gonna go give this green energy to New York
Well,
City.
it goes, when the energy goes on, the grid is it's difficult, a little difficult to describe how it works, but essentially there is a transmission grid. In our case, it's known as the PJM grid. Originally started out as Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. It now encompasses some additional states. And all power producers connect to that grid. And essentially, PJM will tell you when you can fire up your plant. And it's essentially based on, if I try to explain this, I'll make it
Yeah.
more
So
complicated.
basically, it's like this.
But everybody's, energy that's lighting our lights right here, it could be coming from Calvert Cliffs, it could be coming from a coal plant up in Pennsylvania, it can be coming, from a lot of different places, we don't know, but the wind farm would just connect to that grid.
Right.
And the regulated utility is forced
Right.
to purchase power at above market rates.
So it's kind of like if I go to a restaurant and I say, I'd like a cheeseburger, I might get a cheeseburger and I might get a french fry. And I just get what I get, even though I already paid for the entire cheeseburger with fries.
trying to think of a good analogy to it. It would be if.
Just pay for it, and
It would
you might
be
get
if you
it.
could go to if McDonald's would sell a hamburger for $5. And then the state said, you can't buy the $5 hamburger from McDonald's, you have to buy the $6 hamburger from Burger King.
But you might not get a hamburger at all.
Your lights are still gonna come on, it's just.
Yeah, from the
you know,
coal-fired plant.
They'll tell you, when
Coal-fired
US Wind
plant.
and Orsted comes in, it's connecting in Delaware, and they'll tell Delaware, great idea, this wind is gonna power 5,000 Delaware homes paid for by Maryland.
All right. Last thing, so this extension, how many days are we gonna have to review? This is kind of like the federal government is, we'll read it after, we'll see what's in it. We're gonna pass it and then we'll see what's in it? Is that kind of how we are?
Well, what happens, they've received this giant document from US Wind known as Construction Operations Plan. They review that document. Based on what's in that document, they issue what's known as a draft environmental impact statement that'll say, it'll be a giant volume of things as well. And it will essentially say, we think this project is good and should move forward. We think this project is bad and should not move forward, or generally what they do is, we think this project is good and should move forward, but do X, Y, Z. Then the public, us, have 45 days to comment on that. And then BOEM takes all those comments, is supposed to address all those comments, take all of them into consideration, and then BOEM will issue a final environmental impact statement, which is essentially, for lack of a better term, the permit to build the project. And that final environmental impact statement, same thing, could say, you can't do it, you can do it, or you can do it with conditions.
So do we have 45 days, or are we gonna have like 10 days? I mean, they're saying.
We will have 45
Oh, okay,
days.
got it.
I'd love to have more. 45 days is not very long to review something like this.
Okay.
And frankly, the fact that, they published the COP and then changed it at the last minute is going to make it difficult for us.
Sounds like a really good deal. This business only works at the government.
Secretary DeLuca?
Three questions, Terry. And this isn't one of them. In Italy, off the Amalfi Coast, there's no wind farms. First question is, you said Orsted agreed to, they committed to 20 miles. What did U.S. Wind commit to?
U.S. Wind statement is they will build them as close as their lease will allow, which is.
On the beach.
In their COP, I believe, the COP that they have submitted to the federal government, which will be their permit to tell them where they can build, has turbines as close as 11.5 miles.
Second question, the new larger turbine size, which you know, whether it's approved or not, current size, have you looked at Century 21 and found out a new distance where they won't be seen?
It is the same.
It's a
It is the same. Right now, it's the same.
33 and a half?
Yeah. The right now, and there can be bigger ones coming. Right now, even the 18 megawatt, originally what was discussed was a 12 megawatt turbine. The 18 megawatt turbine is the same dimensions as the 12 megawatt turbine. It's got better generators and stuff like that, but it's the blade, the tower height and the blade size are the same. Now, there are other ones that are being talked about that could be substantially taller. Right now, the U.S. Wind Construction Operations Plan, what they do is they put in what they call a design envelope. So it's allowing them to build slightly taller, but not enough that it makes any significant difference. We don't know what Orsted's going to ask for.
33 and a half is still.
33 and a half is still a
I
good
meant
distance.
Century 1, if I said
Yeah,
something.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Century 1,
The tallest
tallest building.
residential
Thank you.
unit in the town of Ocean City.
Then the
Yes, sir.
last question is, could you please give us this update quarterly? This is the fourth quarter. Could you do it again like in the first quarter?
Sure, and if something substantially changes, we'll let you all know as well.
And thank you. This is really, you did a great job. It's very, very great update, very detailed. There's really merit in having an engineer as a city manager.
Over Gary, thank you.
Yeah, just as a matter of comparison and perspective, when the original lease area was approved, 11 or 12 miles off the coast, the size of the turbines at the time was how large?
300 feet, I believe.
350, they
Yeah,
were 6
yeah.
megawatt.
Yeah.
6 megawatts.
Yeah.
Now we're triple megawatt. And how much physically
Triple.
They're now about, the top of the tower is now at 900 feet, so they've tripled in size.
tripled in size? So the deal has completely changed. So it's, before, they weren't, in that lease area, they were not going to be visible at 350 feet. At 900 feet, obviously, and there's going to
So
be
you could have argued.
hundreds,
yeah.
potentially, of them out there. I'm sorry, go ahead. You could
Yes,
have argued.
that's correct. There was an argument that, well, can you see them, could you not see them, will they be noticeable? The towers they're talking about, even their own renderings, they're clearly visible and clearly noticeable, not anything like anyone ever envisioned.
Been our statement for the last almost 7 years.
It really does look like an army of Terminators walking in off of the ocean.
Star Wars, I've always said it looks like a backdrop of Star Wars.
The transformers are coming on the beach.
That's a good one. Yeah, all those, that's right. I mean,
But it's-
some people think we're exagerating, but they
We're not.
really need to. Even their own, like you said, even their own renderings, these companies, their own renderings. I mean, it is clear as day. Pretty soon, you're gonna be able to see them in the middle of a rainstorm. I mean, it's gonna be that. Anyway, I'm done. I'll keep going.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, just to kind of wrap that up, John made a statement that, people think we're overreacting, yet those same people are going to say at some point in time, how did you ever let that happen?
There's no question about
Because
that.
they're not paying attention.
Yeah, they'll be criticizing us.
Yep.
Especially
Thank
when they know they're not even they're still getting their power from a coal-fired plant somewhere.
If you remember in the meeting we had with the U.S. Wind and that one individual, the
Yeah.
Italian president, didn't he say that we'd get free electricity?
He offered it.
He offered it.
I think it's just hard.
I don't think you're allowed to do that. but-
Real quick, before we close up, Mr. Atkins, you'd sent a message. Would you like to come up and just address a comment that was made earlier?
And I've got one more thing I'd like to say before.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were done.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Huh?